So in cities, we see that energy consumption, electricity consumption will rise the coming years, but especially peak energy consumption will go up 5 times. And the energy system will collapse. We work a lot with cities, for example, local authorities, and they want to become energy neutral by 2040, 2050. It's a political goal. But when we ask them, okay, what is your current energy bill as a city? They have no idea. They have no idea what the households in their municipality consume in total and how much it costs. They don't know how energy gets there. They don't know how to replace that with renewable energy sources or smart energy management solutions. And we're only at the start of the energy transition in that sense. Local authorities did not have a role or responsibility, but now they do have a responsibility. They want to become energy neutral.
Hello and welcome to Ideas That Happen, where we interview innovators and practitioners making ideas for the public good happen. Today I'm joined by Rolf. He's the head of the energy systems team here at Bax & Company. And today we're talking about the local energy transition. So we're living in a world in which renewables are ever cheaper, local authorities have carbon targets that they have to hit, and this is causing essentially a revolution, I would say, within our energy systems. And this has obviously massive implications for local actors, not just global actors. That's housing providers, that's local authorities. Yeah. And that's what you work on, right? You work with local authorities, housing providers who have these challenges and need to change essentially how energy flows through their cities. So, yeah,
yes, absolutely.
That's the challenge.
Thank you, Ben.
So I wanted to start with this idea of energy transition. It's a massive topic. It has global implications, geopolitical implications, but that can seem quite far away for some of the people that you work with, for the local authorities and housing providers. So how do you frame the energy transition to someone at a local level who's trying to figure out what all of these changes mean for their energy system?
Yes, it's a very relevant challenge. I think we're all used that energy, especially renewable energy, electricity, it just comes out of a plug. And most people don't realize that energy is produced somewhere centrally in an energy factory, a coal power plant, a nuclear power plant. And the transition to renewable energies changes that entirely. We're all familiar with solar panels. You can put them anywhere on a large field outside your town, outside the city, but also on your roof. So the energy transition is much more decentral. We can create or generate renewable energy at home. We can store it. We can consume it. And that counts for households, counts for businesses, but also for cities. And all of a sudden, all these local actors, they become active or even become responsible for making the energy transition happen, and they want to. And those are the organizations we work with. We need cities and housing providers.
So when we say a local energy transition, we're not just talking about the local effects of the energy transition. We're talking about how the way energy is wired and energy is managed locally changes completely. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. The whole idea, of course, is that as a society, we change to generating as much renewable energy as possible and consume that renewable energy, but also as local as possible, the decentral energy system. So that means that you'll see energy systems that used to be national with a power plant somewhere in your country or even outside it, will be replaced by energy systems that are local. Maybe half of our energy can be generated locally on your building or in your district. And it means the entire energy system changes. And that's the cool thing about it, is that most people don't realize what that means. We work a lot with cities, for example, local authorities, and they want to become energy neutral by 2040, 2050. It's a political goal. But when we ask them, okay, what is your current energy bill as a city? They have no idea. They have no idea what the households in their municipality consume in total and how much it costs. They don't know how energy gets there. They don't know how to replace that with renewable energy sources or smart energy management solutions. And we're only at the start of the energy transition in that sense. And that's why we're happy that at Bax we help that transition happen.
So for decades, this was arguably the role of the grid operator that would have to solve these problems, right? You put the wires in the ground and then the electricity flows. And I guess for that reason, local authorities have never had to think too much about this part in the middle. Is this something that will no longer be the case, that this is solely a grid operator problem?
It will change very fast, and it will change entirely. So what used to be the case is indeed that any kind of energy that you needed was delivered to you through the grid, the distribution system, and you got a bill at the end of the month. But what we now see is through the energy transition, energy consumption, especially consumption of electricity, goes up. Most people don't realize that if we want to be energy efficient, you replace gas, for example, which emits a lot of CO2, by green electricity. So for most households and businesses, the electricity bill will double, triple, or go up even more. For example, if you want to cook electrically, or if you want to switch from your diesel car to an electric car. And the energy grid, the system that brings energy from the power plant to your home is not built for that at all. So in cities, we see that energy consumption, electricity consumption will rise the coming years, but especially peak energy consumption will go up 5 times. And the energy system will collapse. We see blackouts already happening, and we see that in many cities across Europe, if you want to start a new business, or if you want to open a supermarket or build a school, you cannot connect it to the grid anymore because you cannot get the electricity that you need. And that's a big challenge that local authorities need to solve.
Mm. And in this sense, this sounds like it's not just an electricity problem at that point. If you can't build new schools, new supermarkets, it becomes an urban development problem, a planning problem, right?
Absolutely. It's not about generating renewable energy as such. We know how to do that. It's wind energy, it's solar energy. It's mostly how to get it at the right destination at the right time. It's obvious that most people in the city have the same kind of living patterns. People wake up early in the morning, want to cook something, prepare breakfast, or they take their electric car and drive to work. Energy consumption is massive. Mm. But during working hours, household energy consumption is close to zero. While businesses, the energy consumption increases. And that means that the energy flow is very unstable, and it needs to be managed. And that's what I think the new kind of capability that local authorities need to have to help manage their energy system and help make sure that the investments necessary to get that system ready for basically distributing more electricity will be ready in the coming years.
Okay, so local authorities have this kind of up-and-coming management role, I suppose. Who are the actors they need to be thinking about? If they're taking this management role, who are the new actors in this system? As I understand it, before, the energy system was quite passive. As you say, it was centralized. Energy would come one way down the line and you would consume the energy. But now, suddenly, a business can put some solar panels on their roof and they're an energy producer. So who are the people that local authorities need to be thinking about when they're taking on this kind of management role?
Yes, I think your description is actually where the problem and also the opportunity lies. Local authorities did not have a role or responsibility, but now they do have a responsibility. They want to become energy neutral, and they find that most of the local stakeholders, industry, commercial, but also transport and residential, all of a sudden have their own energy transition plans. Any company can put solar panels on a roof. 20% of households in the Netherlands want an electric vehicle. And what the role of the city will be is to make sure that all these organizations can contribute to the energy transition, while when you take all these individual ambitions together, they are aligned and they don't block off each other. For example, what is an actual problem is that if in a district some buildings would get solar panels on a roof, during the day you consume that energy, but maybe at some point you want to provide energy back to the grid. But then the energy grid reaches a certain capacity and it blocks out the capacity, for example, to charge your electric vehicles. And that kind of alignment of production and consumption, or the balancing of energy flows, is important, but also the balancing of the investments behind that. You can't, in the same district, install 100 charge points for electric vehicles if you also want to, for example, allow everyone to cook electrically instead of on gas. And that's the role of local authorities. So they need to build that new network of regional and local stakeholders, but they need to create the tools as well, the capabilities themselves to understand what is the capacity of our grid, what is the demand and the production capacity of our local energy system, and how can we align those? How can we create the incentives to make sure that the energy transition happens in 10, 20 years without causing major problems such as blackouts?
Yeah. Okay. So imagine I'm an energy manager in a local authority. I hear all this. How do I begin to take on this challenge? It strikes me as a big policy challenge, essentially. It's taking on a new role that local authorities didn't have before. There are financial implications, policy implications. Yeah. How do I start to think about this problem? How do I manage it?
It's actually a new problem. We work with cities across Europe, probably about 50 or so. And none of them, literally zero, have what we would call a local energy action plan, or LEAP, because it's that new responsibility or that new role that local authorities have. So what we see that those organizations want to do is they've over the past 5 years they've been piloting projects. For example, they've learned how to install EV charge points in shopping centers. Maybe they helped industrial estates to set up a local energy infrastructure. Maybe they've promoted households to install PV panels. But all of it is our individual actions, and there's no strategy behind it. And the concept of that LEAP, the local energy action plan, is to understand the needs of the energy system of the future, and building consistent policies or investment incentives, I would almost say, to make sure that the right kind of investments take place at a time that the energy grid is ready for it, and that you don't impede the investments by others or the action by others. Okay. But it's very new.
Yeah.
We haven't seen a LEAP yet. We're building them.
Okay. So that's something to say. So by 2030, you would expect every local authority to have a document, a local energy action plan, that would essentially help them to determine how to create this new reality.
Absolutely, and that's we think that over the coming 5 years we see the first moving cities to develop those plans, and that will uncover a lot of new and I would say almost future problems. I think most local authorities have no idea what the energy bill of their city is, as I mentioned earlier on. Mm-hmm. For a city of 100,000 inhabitants, I think the households, they pay probably about 500 million euros a year for electricity. A business, another 500 million euros a year. So if you talk to a local authority and they say, hey, the energy consumption in your municipality is 1 billion euros a year. Or if you say that the expected investments on upgrading energy system infrastructure is probably 1 to 2 billion euros a year, these are the kind of amounts that they're not used to deal with. And so once you have a strategy, you all of a sudden also find out we need new financial models, and we, as a public sector, we can't and we should not fund this or finance this. You need the collaboration with the private sector. You need collaboration and collaborative models with the citizens in any community.
Let's talk about this finance. So you've talked about the idea of the city energy bill. If you total up all the energy flows in the city, for a city of 250,000 people, it will be about €1 billion, I think, is what we estimated. Where does that money come from? As you suggested, like, local authorities don't necessarily have the money to make this enormous shift. So how do we start finding the investment, the cash that we need to turn the system on?
I think when talking about the energy transition, it's a part of the transition towards a more sustainable society. But the one thing that the energy system is very different than when we talk about sustainability as a whole is that it is revenue generating. Energy is worth a lot. We all have seen our energy bills increase over the past 2 years or so. I think in most countries you now pay 30 cents a kilowatt hour if you're a typical consumer. So that means energy is an asset, and being able to produce energy is an asset. That either, if you produce your own sustainable energy, you reduce your energy bill, or maybe if you produce more than your own energy consumption, you can actually export it. Which means that the energy transition that we discussed, producing renewable energy, or maybe even the underlying infrastructure, has a positive business case. And that's really unique when we talk about the transition towards a more sustainable world. And there's also a reason that finding business models is a real opportunity and a realistic opportunity. So in the end, what we expect is that it makes a lot of sense for public actors to invest in sustainable energy, but also households and also businesses, because there's a real revenue stream or real savings. So I think one of the challenges that we now face, or that we now see, is that now we have all the energy generating technology available, such as solar panels. It is how to roll it out on a very large scale. Mm-hmm. And so that the innovation that we work with is mostly about organizational models and business models. But in the end, 80% private, 20% public, I think will be a good bet.
Okay. But help me understand this, because you always see reports, the idea that solar panels are cheaper than they ever were, and in some ways solar panels can be cheaper than almost any form of activity. Yes. Why does the business case not already exist? What are the barriers that are stopping it? Why do we need the public investment to come first to enable these business models?
Yes. Well, what we do see is that, for example, investment in renewable energy is a high capital investment. If you want to cover your roof with solar panels, or if you want to switch from a combustion engine car to an electric vehicle, that's a very high capital investment. And not all businesses or not all households are willing or even able to invest upfront. So you need to look at alternative ways of financing those solutions. And for some technologies, that's easy. Some of them are fairly reliable, like the electric vehicle. You can lease them. But some of the technologies that are necessary in the energy system of the I would say, near future, are relatively new and hard to finance. Think of energy storage, or think of a concept like a positive energy neighborhood. It means various buildings with PV on top, with a private or publicly owned grid, with maybe some storage capacity. Nobody owns that. So you need to think of new ways of organizing the energy system and new ways of making those systems bankable or financiable.
Are you seeing or working on any models in particular? Can you give an example of one?
Of course, yeah. We are a company that supports innovation. So what we see happen is companies, especially those with a background in engineering or energy systems design, they move into the field of, for example, financing or lease options of very simple solutions. Solar panels leased, or maybe now solar panels and storage. So it's almost energy as a service. That's not yet being rolled out. We maybe see small scale examples in industrial estates, maybe projects of €1 million or so. But that will very quickly grow to a market of hundreds of millions. So there we help companies validate their business model by introducing them to different markets, different geographic markets where rules are slightly different. And we help make sure that there's the proof of that their business model works, especially from a consumer or a buyer perspective. Much more complex is a concept such as positive energy neighborhoods, where you would want to renovate an entire building or maybe a set of buildings and provide green energy at stable prices. Those are concepts that do not yet exist. They exist in a traditional economy, like for example social or affordable housing, but not with the energy systems. So what we're now doing is we work with 5 cities across Europe to develop 5 financially viable positive energy neighborhoods. It's a neighborhood that generates more energy than it needs, and it pays for itself in a reasonable time. And that should ideally lead to a model, and that could be publicly funded, it could also be privately funded, where experts, public organizations with enough expertise, or companies offering it across Europe, people come to you and suggest why it's a good idea to renovate your home or to add renewable energies to your home. So you as a business or as a household don't have to worry about that choice. Very often it's too complex anyway to go for that decision.
Okay, so this is almost somewhat like an as-a-service model in some sense. You see a role for companies that just offer for a fixed fee or for a lease model, some simple business model. They will offer a product to a end customer, whether that be a business or a client.
Yes, absolutely. So standard models that I think anyone can already imagine how it would look like is your solar panels leased. Doesn't matter what kind of organization you are, you get it on your roof for free. But we now see entire business districts being provided with energy by private companies, which is something that outside of Europe, by the way, happened for a long time already. So we're learning actually from the rest of the world, but that's now being developed as a commercial service. And below those integrated concepts, we see a lot of exciting innovations on energy balancing and energy trading, a lot of smart, I would say, IT-driven solutions. And those innovations are relatively new, and those even the markets for that do not yet exist. The players do not yet exist. So we're trying to prototype those, to pilot those, and to see if those business models actually work from a technology perspective, or the end user perspective, or from a societal perspective.
And is there a role for the public authority in this kind of creation of business models, or is it more a case?
Absolutely.
So it's not a case of the public authority stepping back and allowing the private to lever it?
No, for several reasons. I think from a political point of view, access to energy and access to reliable access to energy or low-cost energy, I think, especially in Europe, is seen as a public good and something that you can rely on. You should rely on. Nobody wants to get a surprise energy bill that's twice as high as before. Nobody wants a blackout. So that means there is a very large role for different types of public organizations in that field. Policy comes very often from Europe, turned into regulation at national level, and as we already discussed before, local authorities as an enabler organizer. Very interesting is the level in between. That's not to get too technical, is very often energy distribution operators who operate at mid and low voltage. They can't provide the network, just the capacity of the network to make sure that we can all drive electric vehicles, that we all can cook electrically instead of gas. And they're now creating markets, I would almost say, or fee structures that incentivize companies or households or local authorities to create an energy balance or maybe even energy infrastructure in parallel to our traditional infrastructure. So it's a complex world, but especially at that mid-level, we see so many exciting opportunities where new markets are created that create entire new businesses, entire new industries. And those could be for profit or not for profit.
And I guess it's important to realize that these problems that these new opportunities can solve are happening now in some senses, right? I mean, we talk a lot about grid congestion and the concept of the grid being too full to essentially allow you to add EVs and cooking on the same street, for example. So there's a growing need for these businesses, right? Or there's a growing hole in which these businesses can fill.
It does not yet exist. So the coming years you'll see the first, I would say, local energy system in the port of Barcelona, where we work, where some companies with a lot of PV on their rooftop pass on the energy, sell the energy to their neighbors who might not have that same energy generation capacity or have high demand. We will see the first agreements between cities, large real estate organizations, and network operators to completely rethink the way they invest in the energy grid or storage and the way they compensate each other for investments made and for benefits delivered. We will see entire new technologies entering our cities. Nobody, I think, has seen energy storage, not in a business district, definitely not in a residential district. But we now see batteries appearing in large buildings, in office buildings. We will see hydrogen networks roll out very quickly in energy systems with high energy intensity. That's many billions of investments that will be piloted in the coming years, and that's just a start.
So this is Ideas That Happen. We talk about how you make these kind of concepts become reality. So I want to ask, these technologies and this rollout you talk about, how does this process start? I mean, how do you create the kind of virtuous cycle you need to get from the kind of small pilot scale that we've seen in pockets around Europe to an entire system?
Yeah, we use a concept, maybe you're familiar with it. I think it's originally designed by the NASA, the space agency, to develop technology to actually make spaceflight happen. They call it technology readiness levels. Certain technologies had to be invented from scratch, from an idea, to be developed in a laboratory, to be tested in real life, and actually used in space. That is technology readiness level 0 to 9, 9 being the final stage. What we now see in the energy transition world is that the technologies are there, but the business models and the associated policies not yet. So what we work on and what we work on with our both businesses and the public sector is to think of the policies and the business models that are able to reach the scale level of the challenge that we face. And that's a surprise for many of our clients. As mentioned, a local authority doesn't realize that their citizens spend €1 billion a year on energy. But once you understand the scale of the challenge, you know that you have to think big. You know that your policies have to meet the size of that challenge. And for businesses, the same. It doesn't matter anymore to now develop a technology that might lead to a €10 million business. It is, in the coming years, a multi-billion euro business. And our job is to pilot for scale. That's what we do. Policy readiness level, business readiness level.
Okay, fantastic. I want to end perhaps a bit on some advice that you would give, potentially, because that was a lot of big ideas, and certainly transformation is enormous. If you were talking to, as I'm sure you often do, to a local authority energy manager, what would you be advising that they think about as they take on the next 5 years, or if they have 2030 energy targets, carbon targets? What do you advise that they start doing?
I think the most inspirational examples that we see are from the people we work with in the private sector, banks especially. Mm-hmm. They don't see the energy transition anymore as an experiment, but they think in billions of euros of investment and markets, and they think of the energy transition in gigawatt hours. And when we set up with a large bank and a program to improve energy efficiency in buildings, they count billions. And what I think would be an advice to most of, for example, most of the local authorities across Europe that we work with, or most businesses, they need to think in hundreds of millions. And once you see that scale level, you can reverse engineer the kind of team, the kind of internal capabilities that you need to work with. Yes, you need an expert of finance. Yes, you need to do long-term investment planning. And that's a kind of vocabulary and a mindset that we encourage our clients and our partners to work with. Because that's the only way to make ideas happen at the scale that we need them to happen.
Okay, so thinking hundreds of millions, gigawatts, billions, absolutely. The kind of scale that we need. Yeah,
you need to be brave to get there, but that's the size of the challenge.
Yeah, and on such a short time scale as well, I guess that's you need to get started fairly quickly, presumably.
Absolutely. Yeah. The largest investments that we now see happen, the largest projects, especially in the public sector, are maybe 1 million or so. But the projects that we're now preparing with the municipalities in Sweden, in Belgium, in Estonia, in Spain, they reach the size of 10 to 100 million. And that's I think is inspirational, and we'll see the results quickly. And luckily there, we see that it's not those organizations operating on their own. The municipality often feels that they don't have the expertise and they need peer collaboration to jointly design projects and feel the confidence that they need, confidence from other organizations in the same stage, maybe support from the the city board, but also support from European institutions or national institutions. And that ecosystem is now being developed. And it's absolutely necessary to get those results and actually see the results of how we want the world of tomorrow to be like.
Yeah, I'm glad you say confidence. I was going to ask about this because I mean it is it can be a scary challenge, right? Or it's certainly a daunting challenge. And you see confidence coming from working with other actors, sharing knowledge, and essentially trying to learn from the mistakes of others, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, but that's the soft side of confidence. And I do think the soft or the social side of confidence is working with people who have similar experiences or are facing the same challenges. Yeah. Peer learning is very important. And that's something that I really believe in. If we bring 4 or 5 cities together to scale up their investment proposals, it works if they see from each other how that works, how you can actually present a convincing case to your director. At the same time, there also is a non-social component. It's just the hard measures to do risk reduction. Public sector guarantees or grants, they're absolutely crucial. And what we see happen is that we can bring, for example, Europe closer to even a local authority. We can bring the European Investment Bank and their financing solutions, their guarantee solutions, but also grants to a medium-sized city. And all of a sudden, they have the power of Europe behind them. And that really helps in convincing all stakeholders at a local level to actually spend the time and energy and on getting a project done because they know that they have peers, they have friends, and they know they're financially secure. And that's our role.
Okay. So it's an interesting place to end, I think. So it strikes me, although this is a local energy transition, you're not going to find all your solutions locally. There's a European scale to this in some way.
And that's the exciting thing of how we work. We see those front-runner examples, the state-of-the-art, happen across Europe. It could be technological innovations, it could be business model innovations, it could be policy innovations. And we take those examples. Sometimes we are lucky enough that we're part of developing those examples, and then we bring them to other front-runner cities. And you're absolutely right. It's you don't want to invent the wheel. You don't want to yourself go through the challenge of finding out how to finance, what technology fits best, or how to create an in-house team that can develop that local energy action plan. And you want to learn from the best, and you want to learn from the mistakes as well. Yeah. And that's where I think we get out of the experiment phase and on the energy transition. And that's what I'm very proud. I'm very happy that we can work on that, finding those ideas, make them happen, and bring them to the next group of organizations that want to make the energy transition happen.
Fantastic. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Rolf, for your time. If you're interested in learning any more about how your city or your housing provider, anything like that, can advance your energy transition, we'll leave some links in the comments. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time for more Ideas That Happen.